we ready? Okay. Hello. Thank you for coming and welcome to the third event of our Native Speaker Series, Classroom Connections, Teaching the Next Generation of Native Artists. We're so happy to have you all out here on this beautiful morning. And for those of you tuning in on YouTube, thank you for joining us. I'm just going to introduce our speakers and then I'll turn things over to them. Leah Mata Fragua is an artist, educator, and member of the Yak-Tichu tribe located on the Central California coast. As a place-based artist, Leah's kin-centric approach seamlessly blends shared iconography with personal imagery, highlighting the impact each has on the other. She uses a diverse range of materials, from place-based to recycled, to explore the interconnectedness and dependence between land, kinships, and self. She understands that her art is a reflection of the way she prioritizes the protection of traditional materials and the continuation of art forms that are important to her community, which intersect with her individual practice. Leah holds a BA in anthropology, an MA in cultural sustainability, and an MFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts in the Studio Arts program. Leah's work is held in the collections of the Autry Museum, Tia Collection, Denver Art Museum, the Hood Museum, and private collections. Please join me in welcoming Leah Mata Fragua. We're also so excited to have Savannah Morales with us here today. Savannah is a multimedia artist from the Santa Rosa Rancheria Tachi-Yokut tribe, originating from California's San Joaquin Valley. She is a mixed-race, mixed-media naturalist artist that works in various materials, which include digital art, photography, and painting. Morales creates beautiful depictions of life within their ecosystems. She does this by capturing eliminating light movement. Currently, Ms. Morales serves as the lead artist on the upcoming community mural titled Water is Life 2025, which is being displayed at the Institute of American Indian Arts Student Union building. Savannah is receiving her Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree in photography within the Studio Arts Department at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is her last semester, so that's so exciting. She currently has 2 Polaroid photography pieces in the 2024-2025 IAIA BFA exhibition ending May 16th at the IAIA Museum of Contemporary Native Arts. That's MOCNA. So if you haven't had a chance to go and see them, you should all go and see them. Please welcome Savannah. So I'm going to turn things over to you all, and then at the end of your presentation, we'll take audience questions and go from there. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Hachu Michia Leah Mata Fragua. I am from a small community on the central coast of California, and I have been adjuncting at the Institute of American Indian Arts for almost 10 years now, while maintaining my own practice. And so just recently, this year, I got an email from a student, and so that's how I met Savannah, and I'll let Savannah introduce herself.
Yeah, everybody, hello. My name is Savannah Morales. I am Tachi-Yokut from Central California. My reservation or rancheria is located in the center of the farming capital of California. I am a Tulare Lake Yokut person, and it is an honor to be here today to speak with you.
So we're going to move to this first slide here. And I got to tell you, it was really hard to find a map that still showed Tule Lake. And a lot of people don't even realize that California once had the largest lake in California is no longer in existence because all of that water has been rerouted and taken. And Savannah's community is a part of that lake. And I think when I think about how we communicate, because my tribe traded with Savannah's tribe, and we have a lot of intermarriages, and so we brought shell from the coast, and they had resources like freshwater fish and things that we needed. And so there was a lot of trade back and forth between our communities. And so our relationship is built through water and shell. And I think Savannah said that beautifully when we were rehearsing. I wish we would have recorded that because it came out really good. But she said that your shells speak to me, right? They communicate that we're of the same people or we're from the same community. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about how you sought me out, because I actually don't have Savannah as a student.
Yeah.
Even though I teach her, she wasn't one of my students.
I think the first time we met was really fate. I had a piece showing, actually, this bandana right here, showing at an exhibition at my school. And Leah recognized the pattern. I had seen her for a while, admiring it. And, just me standing, back as an artist, trying to witness, what people are receiving from this. Noticing that Leah stopped, and I have admired her work for years, so I knew exactly what she was recognizing, and I was so happy to be seen. So then, of course, I approached her with, seeking that knowledge and mentorship, and, it's really awesome to be here, like, have come this far with you.
Yeah, and it was a student exhibition at Bowser Gallery, and I did notice this, and I was like, wait, what? We have another California student here? Because it's really hard to find other California Indian people. We're really invisible, and we don't have large communities. Our communities are very small and village-based and kinship-based, and so when I saw this, it almost startled me, because I was like, wait, I did not know there was another California student here. And so she was standing to see who would react to her piece, and so that's kind of how we connected. And so I think it's really important that we recognize how important visibility is, right? Especially for students, to find people that might have similar knowledge and interest and understanding. And so I remember our first kind of meeting. It was, well, I'll let you talk about that. Our first time when we met.
Yeah, my first time, having a conversation with Leah, we were talking about my projects and where they were going with my senior project. Trying to combine, years of work and experience into one show. It's really, I'll say, complicated, right? You're trying to fit everything. You're wanting to express everything that you've learned, and it's more than just showing, right? It's telling, and it's like, what are these art pieces telling? So having Leah look at my work, she recognizes where these works are coming from and, what they're trying to communicate. So then having her input and, insights, that was really like the biggest step towards them. I was working with cyanotype. It was my first time trying to, tell my familial story and, work within that realm of, I'm currently my family's historian, trying to turn these years of images and, our family history into, something to preserve and, to really have that documentation, at least within ourselves. So, hearing the insights on my cyanotypes and how that connects with water as well, that process and, that color and that, water history and knowledge, it was really nice to be seen.
And then when we were meeting, I was like, wait, I know your family. And I had to pull out my iPhone and scroll through pictures. And so we have intermarriages between our communities. So I do actually have pictures of her relatives on my phone.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But I knew the place because my mom was born in the same place that you were born.
Yes.
So we have history in place. And then again, our communities go back so far that even in the J.P. Harrington recordings, for those of you that are anthropologists, on the wax cylinders, my grandma actually, well, great-grandmas, actually have songs in their language that she has archived. And so it was instant, right? And so I think, when we think about why do we need diversity? Okay, I'm almost afraid to say that word, but why we need it, because it does matter to students to be seen, and to be seen within their instructors, and to be seen by their mentors in a way that can only happen between our relationship or our tribal relationships and those histories of those tribal relationships. So one of the things that made Savannah realize there was another California Indian looking at her work was Shell, right? And I think you said it beautifully yesterday when you said, what did you say, Shell talks to us, or Shell was communicating for us,
It's
right?
the bridge for communication. It's that, what it holds and what it, reflects onto each other and, past even this form. So yeah, it's eternal communication, but.
And we both, as people who understand the importance of this shell and how far inland it was traded and how many communities have relationship to this shell and to our communities who brought it inland, we both are aware that there is a threat to this species, and currently we're not allowed to gather any longer, so which really changed my entire practice because I was only working with this medium. And so I'll let Savannah talk a little bit more about this project here.
Yeah, so coming from a tribe that really had our whole ecosystem taken from us, I'm trying to express myself in these different mediums, mixed mediums, right? Trying to bring these things back into like traditional ways of trading and gifting. So something I noticed is I actually recently got my first abalone shell and at a thrift store, and this is it, and it's a California shell, and that fate of it was really just awesome. And being able to like have this shell in my presence like really pushed me to create a ceramic abalone shell. This is before bisque, so it's currently being bisqued at the Institute of American Indian Arts. But I'm wanting to cast my shell in a ceramic cast to reproduce them and give them to back to my people so that they can have these representations and like these physical aspects of their own culture, because it's rare and illegal to even obtain these things these days. So to have those representations, it's like it's needed. It's life, really.
And yeah, and so that kind of led to your conversations about how do we, as artists, shift our practice when these types of materials are no longer available to our communities. And because we're on the coast, I feel like communities on the coast are experiencing climate change a little differently than people or communities that might be isolated from seeing, the changes happening. And so I think this shell is a perfect example of something that in my lifetime I could easily access, and now it's illegal for me to access it, which means Savannah's generations don't have any access to shell. And so what does that look like? How do we then give our community access to a material that's incredibly important to our communities? And so, we both have these conversations about experimenting with having that value continue just through other mediums. And so her experimentation with making ceramic abalone shells, if she's gifting those to community, then that value and that memory that is associated with abalone shells still holds true. Right? We're just using different mediums to convey that due to climate change. And so that was another area that we connected through, and I think it's because we do come from a place that still does a lot of land stewardship practices. Both of our communities, or I think it's further north for controlled burns. Oh, yeah. So a lot of our communities are still doing controlled burns. We're still doing a lot of land stewardship practices. And so those are areas where our interest and experiences overlap. So we will have to come back so we can see your finished product. Or maybe we can post it on SAR so people can see what a ceramic abalone shell would look like. Oops. And so when you teach in institutional spaces, I feel like sometimes they can be very extractive. So for me, part of my teaching practice is to really model reciprocity. So I've been dragging this poor child everywhere with me. I don't know if she even wanted to do half of the stuff I'm dragging her into, but I was like, no, I'm pulling you with me. And I think that's important, especially in the arts, especially as women in the arts, right, to not be in competition. There is enough room at the table for all of us. And so I feel like as an older person, part of my role is to pull people up with me, especially our younger female students. And so it's for me, when I met Savannah, it was about like teaching kin in a way that has gone back for thousands of years between our communities. And it's not just like I'm teaching curriculum, right? It goes beyond the classroom and it goes beyond the curriculum. And while I cannot speak for all the professors at IAIA, I feel like a lot of us do feel like our students and our community is kin. And I think SAR probably has that kind of relationship with IAIA as well, that a lot of students come through these doors and a lot of relationship building happens between those two institutions. So I wanted Savannah to talk a lot about this because it really this piece speaks to our relationship and our knowledge and history of each other's homelands.
So this piece is...
and your critique I gave you. I don't think you liked my critique.
No, the critiques really push you to make that change that's constructive in that visual communication. And it's much needed, especially you understanding I'm not having to explain in circles. It's visual understanding and what is and isn't, working with that. This piece is for my senior thesis exhibition. It's a reflection piece with my self-portrait replacing on the map where Tulare Lake lied in the Central Valley of California. So I hand...
pointer? Wait, I think there's a laser. Oh, no. Oh.
So with this...
Tech help. Okay, I didn't do the laser. I think it's this thing. Is there a laser on there? Okay, wait. I was going to try and give her the laser, but
I think the middle button.
I think I messed up.
This button.
Oh, okay. Okay, there you go.
Okay, awesome. This is really cool. So this is a sandblasted mirror that I have been working on. So this is the Central Valley of California. This really... Oh yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
There we go.
Can you see? So this is a self-portrait I took of myself, initially representing the moon and like, you know, the face of disappointment, looking over like the reality that we live in these ecosystems that are like really, you know, dying and disappearing. And I repurposed it for this mirror because I had realized that my face shape is the same outline of the lake where it once lied. So just a beautiful coincidence, really. But so I hand carved this vinyl in the reflection areas that represent where other natives in California lie, really. These islands and, you know, even ancestrally, the middle of California was all inhabited by water, like fully submerged. So I sandblasted, you know, where these ancestral waters lied, which we refer to as Pa'ashi, you know, kind of echoing these like lost stories really of these ecosystems that have been ecocided that, you know, reflect the genocide of California as well. So this is my mirror piece that is accompanying, you know, pictures of what I am witnessing, the water representation in my area, which is just like really dirty canals, you know, miles of farmland and, you know, just dirty air really. Yeah, and you know, this sandblasting also kind of echoes like the story and the reality of you know, valley fever being existent in my area because of the extinction of the lake. That dry waterbed that, kind of just floats through the whole central area in between these two mountain ranges. And we just kind of live within that reality.
Show 'em my area.
Oh yeah, this is where Leah's at right here,
That's my,
the Central Coast.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was a really experimental thing for me because, me and Leah were talking.
Originally, this was not your plan.
It was not. My plan has changed about, I'll say 4 times. And I'm very thankful for people being flexible with me and, really wanting and pushing me to like express myself clearer. And, that's something that takes years. And, I'm still working towards that. But I'm glad that, I am moving in a really effective direction with that, hopefully.
Yeah, and for those that are unfamiliar with the lake, again, the San Joaquin Valley, the reason it produces so much food is because it is on the bed of a giant, giant lake. So the fertilizer, the natural fertilizer that happens through fish, waste, and plants.
Millennia.
Yeah, it makes it very rich soil. And so that's why the San Joaquin Valley has turned into farmland. And also, it is a place for large cattle farms, which have also impacted the area. And so valley fever is also hantavirus, right? And it happens a lot in the Central Valley of California because of the loss of this lake. So I think also part of what our relationship on is this loss of water and a loss of a way of life that both of our communities relied on. And I think it's almost in that grief, right, that we connect. We're trauma bonding. Thousands of years of trauma bonding. But,
Ancestral trauma bonding.
yeah. But when you lose a body of water like that, it does have generational impacts. And it was just something that we were able to connect on. Like, she didn't have to explain it to me. I'm like, oh, I know what that is. And I'll tell you, that first slide where is a map from 1871, I think it was. But it was one of the only maps I could still find the Tulare Lake being identified. That's why you see that basin in California, right? Water. No more water now. So it's been, again, part of our journey, though, is to talk about these spaces and to be an advocate for these places and these ecosystems through our practice. And again, that's something that we both aligned on because not every artist thinks about water in this way or loss of shell and loss of resources in a way that you do when you are connected and tied to places like that are no longer the way that your even great-grandparents remember them.
And something I would like to add is that the lake actually came back. It forced its way home.
During the floods.
Yeah.
It forced its way back.
In 2023. And I got to witness that. And I was really thankful. And that's where a lot of this speaking comes from. Like witnessing that and realizing that like how vast it really was.
Yeah, in the rain, the what do they call it? The Pineapple Express or something. The rains that happened in 23 in California. This lake was literally forcing its way back, and it displaced a lot of farmers and a lot of people. But you and I were secretly like, yes. Not that we want to celebrate loss of land, but in California, it is overpopulated, and we have lost so much of our homelands, and so it makes it hard to implement our land stewardship practices because we have limited land or space to do that in. And so we are seeing, right, nature wanting to return through floods and fire. in California. And so our perspectives on those are very different, probably, than the general population. But I love this piece. Tell them what you were going to do, because I think that's important, your process.
Yeah, I was really wanting to communicate how, like, the loss of water has resulted in a loss of, like, access to cultural, like, ways of living. So I have had the honor of at least creating 2 baskets in my lifetime, which is a luxury, really, with mentorship and things like that. So my initial project was actually to sandblast a basket pattern on here and to put my basket in the center and, fill it with water, and showing that relationship is, like, it's needed, it's necessary. You can't have one without the other. And also, like, that pattern of just continuance that was meant to be placed there. Just that relationship of knowledge and, keeping that going, and how much, like, how rare that is, really.
Right, and we had a discussion about being from weaver communities. So both of our communities are well known for their basketry. And so it is a luxury now to be able to learn how to weave, because one, we don't have very many weavers left. And also being able to access material is a privilege. Because of environmental degradation, so much of our materials are no longer available for us, but also the time, right? Yes. Because it's a slow process, and it's a process that is seasonal, and so you can't just say, I'm going to go do this today. If it's not the time, it's not the time. It's not going to happen. And so we were talking about how we both wish we could weave more, and how much we grieve, right, not being able to have that time and that privilege. Because who gets to take off and study with an elder for 3 or 4 months or a whole year, which is really what's needed. You get bits and pieces, but it's not like a true mentorship. And so we were talking about what a privilege it is just to be able to even weave. So a lot of times the practices that we are interested in aren't in institutions or taught in institutions, or taught in community. And so being able to just be in community and to be a student is a real privilege, and we don't often get that as California Indian artists. I was telling her, I want to ask the audience, how many California Indian artists can you name? Maybe 3, maybe James Luna, right? Maybe Fritz Solder, and maybe Harry Fonseca, right? How many women? Kara? Mm-hmm. One? So we're an incredibly invisible group, and I think that that's how, again, we connected. And so I think for me, it's been, I feel like it's almost like, because I have kids, right, that this is just going to be another one of my kids. And poor Savannah's stuck with me, dragging her around everywhere. Wait, where'd that thing go? Oh. And so one of the things that, like I said, it goes beyond the classroom, and this relationship and this mentorship will be forever, because we do know each other's communities. I do have relatives in her community. And we talked about future projects that we can do. And I think that it's, like I said, it's all about sharing knowledge and not being a gatekeeper, and being able to drag Savannah with me everywhere. Because we do learn outside of the classroom, and mentorships are incredibly important, as well as fellowships, right? Those are so important to students. And so if you are in a position to ever donate to support fellowships, or to donate to IAI for student scholarships, it is incredibly important, and this is testament to why that is so important. And I have to say that all of the interns that come out of SAR, I always have such a wonderful relationship with them, and some of them I talk to most of them still to this day and do projects with them beyond their internship here. And so fellowships and internships are so incredibly important to young people to give opportunity. And so I really always want to encourage everyone to please, if they are in a position to support financially, that these programs do need support, because they are important and they do help students, because they do go, beyond after she graduates, right? She's already scoping out internships here, like asking about them and stuff, because they're important for students, especially as they're transitioning out of school, whether that be undergrad or graduate. Fellowship and internships are so important to students so that they can continue developing and growing. And it's about mutual learning with students as well. I always learn from my students. They're always challenging me. And so I think even for me, it's a reciprocal relationship. So I'm going to let you talk about this little piece here.
This little piece is a little replica of, what lies close to my home, which is a slough, which is an off-branching from the original lake. And, I put a mimic of my thumbprint in the center of it, for identity. And, a lot of my I'll say reconnection work really is idol work. And it becomes a part of my exploration and within myself and my art practice. So this was actually, just a little independent project I did with extra coils I had, and really testing out the, how far a glaze can stretch really, and mixing those things. So the slough on my rancheria, actually, we get water from what's called the last ditch water source. So after all the farms have had their water, we get the remainder of that. And, sometimes we don't even have water in that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the turtles and fish that did live there, in that small, just pocket of water, have just disintegrated over time, their population. So, just having these little pieces of home really, motivate me and connect me to keep going on this messaging of, where I come from, and, what really matters, right, is this connection that has been eternal really between human and nature. And really those things aren't separate, but we are seen as separate in the modern. But yeah, so this is a little mimic of the slough. And this tree actually used to lie right across the street from my house. And it just recently fell, but so I recreated this to kind of remember that, where we used to swim.
Used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are communities in California that do, in the San Joaquin Valley, run out of water. And that happens quite a bit. And it's sad, because that was an area where our largest freshwater water source once was. And I love that we both are connected to our place, know of each other's places, know of each other's materials, and those exchanges that happen. And I just love that we can have these conversations on campus. And peep in her little painting studio. What are you doing? What's going on over here? And I think that, like I said, it's really important as professors or mentor that we remember that these relationships are important and meaningful. I mean, how many of you still have elementary school teachers that you remember, or junior high teachers, right? It's an important position, it's an important job, and you have to take it seriously, and you have to you have to check your ego, and you have to be able to meet students where they're at. And I think it's not just about this hierarchy. I know in for students you haven't taken my class, so we didn't get to have a class together because we found each other the very last semester. I had no idea there was another California Indian student in the campus. But when I think about working with students, I think, in my classes, especially in my anthro class, I always tell students, my favorite political and organizational structure are bands, which is what we come from in California. We didn't have like these large tribes. We come from smaller bands. And the thing about bands, which I love, and I wish I could go back to being under that organizational and political structure, is our bands were egalitarian. And each person, based on their skill set, took a leadership role. Right? So if you were good at this, great, you were a leader that week because that's what we needed. And so leadership was shared. But also in egalitarian communities, there's consensus building, consent. Everybody had housing, food, water. If you needed a doctor, you could get an Indian doctor, right? So medicines were available for free. So everybody had what they needed. So in my classrooms, I call them bands, and students get to participate in designing the course in terms of what they're going to do for homework. So for midterms, I'm like, okay, we're going to cover this, but what do you want to do for your midterm? And so in my class, we kind of come to consensus about our assignments, and we kind of had this egalitarian approach rather than a hierarchy, because I don't think hierarchies work in terms of really fostering learning and relationship building. I think for most of us, when I started teaching, I was like, oh, I've got to be this hardcore teacher. There's a syllabus, and this is going to be due, and nobody's going to take advantage of me. But you realize that that's not an approach that works, and that the ways that we taught each other, right, outside of the classroom, or the way we work with each other outside of the classroom, can be incorporated within the classroom settings. So I don't know if you wanted to share about your educational experience at IAIA, not just with me, but just your overall experience.
Yeah, overall, I've really been trying to take advantage of the library that they have there and really backtracking my own research, trying to understand really what happened to this lake, right? And I think I did happen to find one document that kind of tracked the water sources in California to the population. So they would actually dam these waters and, specifically kill fish population to see exactly how many natives from these regions or lakes would, they would count and see what was working and what wasn't. And I think that was a part of the process of the extermination of Tulare Lake. So that being a really big resource was a really big threat to them or their mission. So yeah, I've really been taking advantage of.
And we have a good library.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I think we do. I spent a lot of time in there.
Yeah, I use the online library a lot to, reverse research things, find these keywords, and then also what they referred to us as is a really interesting thing to find out, and also just, I think sometimes Wikipedia also gives me some keywords or key clues on what I'm really looking for. I didn't know until recently that Tulare Lake, or my people were islanders, because there was just these really small plots of islands that, just rose above this very large shallow water that was Tulare Lake. And just finding these things out is just really amazing in self-discovery. And I just really appreciate the things that I'm taking out of school, other experiences with other students too. That goes really far.
And what made you go to IAIA? Because one thing I know about IAIA is they don't really do a lot of outreach to California people. And so we often don't have a lot of California Indian students. So for me, when I see someone, I'm just like, oh, someone from home. Because I do miss home sometimes. I mean, it's different out here. I love it, but it is always nice to see someone from home. So what made you choose to come out to IAI?
So this is kind of a random story, really, but so I graduated during COVID. I'm a 2020 student, senior, and originally it wasn't really in my cards. I think some cousins of mine mentioned it because they knew people who went to school there, not them themselves, but people, right? Your friends, your relatives from outside of the state. And that, I think, just that seed really planted it for my dad, especially. He was always rooting for my art. So he sent in the application to them to mail it to our house, and it was never coming. He's like, I'm always sending this in, but it's never coming. It happened to go to my neighbor's house, which is your relative. And we had history class together, and he was always telling me, oh, yeah, this and that. What are you doing after college? We were having these talks together. And I was like, yeah, I am kind of looking into other things, right? Like my dad's applying and trying to see the paperwork for IA. And he's like, yeah, they're always sending me letters. They want me to go there so bad. And he said, they've sent me about 5 letters, like the registration. And I said, well, like, I think that's for me. Like, would you mind sliding me one? And he was like, no, I think that they're meant for me. But luckily I printed one online, and I think that from applying so many times, they received my phone number. So in between the midst of this COVID, right, I did receive 2 scholarships for athletics, which was soccer and softball at the time, and those 2 things were like really close to home. So it was like this bridge of like, do I stay home and do this thing, or do I go experience a whole nother thing? And they called me and they said, you're eligible to stay in the dorms here. That was a whole nother experience, moving to another state. So I did decide to take that leap, and that's how I ended up at IA.
Yeah. So straight from hers. And their reservations very small and also very checkerboard with farm and agriculture lands, which is common for a lot of California communities. Again, our land bases are very small, and usually if you are in the inland areas in the valley, they are very checkerboard because you're sharing that place with a lot of farmers and a lot of cattle ranchers.
Yeah. Billion-dollar industries, right? Yearly, annually, it's a big industry, really, in my area. That farming, and yeah, just
And the almond.
almonds, the pistachios. That comes from my area. The Cuties factory isn't too far from us. They always say that when you're driving home, when you see the Cuties box, that's how you know you're about like 30 an hour away. It's interesting, really, as like a Yokut person living in between like such big, landmarks in California. So I'm located, like bigger mapping is Los Angeles and San Francisco. And then smaller mappings is in between Fresno and Bakersfield, which those 2 are huge farming industry, like they're known for that. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting. I think that one of the biggest cotton producers actually lies on the center of the Tulare Lake Basin, or where it was. So right in the center is the largest cotton producer. And I think something we mentioned too is how a lot of our peoples were relocated to these farms to work on them.
Right, so in my community, California has 18 unratified treaties. So just so y'all know, they're still sitting unratified, and we're still waiting for them to do something. California has a very long colonization history as well, through several waves, right? So we had the mission period, which was funny because we were in here, we're like, this kind of reminds us of our missions. So we have the mission period, then we have the Mexican period, then we had the American period, and we had the gold rush. And all of those waves had really impacted and devastated our communities. And so, like, just for us to be here is a miracle, right? It's a miracle. There was only 2 or 3 families in my community left by the time the missions and the Spanish period came through. And yeah, so we do have a lot of, like I said, trauma bonding, generational trauma bonding. But I think that when we think about that loss and that grief, one of the ways that we express it is through our art. And there aren't a lot of support for California Indian artists within California. And so it did make sense for you to come out here, and get that education at a tribal college. And it's funny because sometimes, we do talk about like what it's like to be California Indian and how rare it is to see one another in spaces outside of California. And also in your community, so we have like these paths that go from your community to my community. And I was telling her the other day, one time we were out at Morro Bay at Solstice, which is one of our solstice areas, and we kept seeing these other people there every year, and we were like, where are they from? And so one year my cousin and I were like, we're gonna go ask them where they're from. So we're like, where are you guys from? And they're like, oh, we're Mono, which is like also from your territory. So there are still people from your communities that still come out to our places for solstice. And we had never really engaged with them because that disrupt that happened had happened so long ago that a lot of these kinships are broken, and people are trying to like reformulate them. And so it was just really magical though when you were like, yeah, this is my family, and I'm like, wait, I was scrolling through my phone, I'm like, this is your auntie, this is someone, I know these people. And it's crazy.
And I think in terms of like that library resource, something that I did find, like, trying to indigenize my artwork and, really bring that full circle, is that actually one of the routes that I found was to Monterey Bay.
Right.
And that we would take this trail there and we would do ceramics. And I had never known this. So, like finding these little pieces just scattered in books, it's really something awesome. And I think even I find things that are really that really speak to the history, even in books that don't have my name or my tribe in the title, because we are very small. I think when we were established, we had 40 members, and we were just kind of put onto a junkyard, really.
Yeah.
So.
And your water taken away.
Yeah.
At the same time, so there was only 40 people left in their community, and then, so with my community, the reason why we intermarried heavily into Tachi and the other Yokut territories was because when they needed migrant farm worker labor for the valley, because the valley was exploding with agriculture, people from my tribal community were taken to Hanford. And I was telling her a little story about there was a little neighborhood of California Indians in Hanford. It's torn down now. It's like, but they were these farm worker camps that a lot of California Indians on the coast were brought over to work in agriculture. And so there was a lot of intermarrying within those small little barrios and those communities. So, so we'll start leaving some time for questions, but I put this baby basket here because this is a plant that grows in those marshes that we talked about, and some of Savannah's photography work that you'll see in her final BFA show shows these tules that are growing in the canals because tule is an important plant to California Indian people, and it grows in like lake areas and marshlands. It's a plant that filters, so think of it like your aquarium filter, right? It's a very important plant that keeps our water clean. And in my community, we make our baby baskets with them. And so when I think about baby baskets, I think about like how these plants, how our children, like when they're put in these baskets, they grow up knowing that plant, right? They're born immediately and put into these baskets so that they can start remembering the smell of the plant and the sound of the plants. And it's such an important plant in our communities. And I think about these baby baskets as being nurturing and caring. And so I feel like as a mentor with Savannah, I feel like I'm putting her in my little basket. Like this is representational of our relationship.
Yeah.
And your baskets are different.
Yeah.
Their baskets are cooler. Their baskets are amazing. You have to look up. I don't even know. I can't remember if there's yo-cut baskets in your collection here. I think I might have saw one Central Valley basket here, but I could be mistaken. But so yeah, their baskets are way cooler than our baskets. But this is kind of how I see, my role as a mentor, that, embracing students and kind of nurturing them and going beyond just the classroom. I always tell my students, when you are in undergrad, find that teacher that's going to write, your go-to teacher that's going to write you those letter of recommendations, right? That's going to be your lifelong, cheerleader beyond school. And you can come back 5 years later, I'm applying for this, can you write me a letter of recommendation? Find that go-to teacher, stay in contact with them, build relationships with them, because that is going to be your network. That is going to be your safety net. That is going to be your, hopefully, cheerleader that drags you with them everywhere. So you're going to start seeing her getting everywhere with me. And so I don't know if you kind of had any closing reflections, and then we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, it's just been a really awesome time, really, to be able to communicate with you, especially the influence that you are, at least to California, artists. And just seeing you has been a really big representation in my life. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And just the importance of these things and these conversations, and even reconnections, right? Having, some of these stories that might not have stuck with our tribe, but are passed down to your tribe, through oral history. Mm-hmm. So it's really nice to be able to have those conversations and find out new things, especially about people that we have in common. So that's been really awesome.
And I do have to confess that we called you guys mean. in the archives, we said you guys were mean. I better prepare you. You'll come across that. I don't know why we called you guys mean, but we did. So there's maybe some beef going on a long time ago.
To be fair, there was a lot of different families from different islands. So a lot of people from our tribe are different mm-hmm. families. So Tachi isn't necessarily what we all are. It's just what we all have claimed to be, where we have been placed as. So I'm
so there's some mean people in your community now. So we can go ahead and then open it up for questions.
Okay. Let me give you the mic so people on YouTube can hear you.
I was just trying to place where your village is.
So my village is across the mountains, directly from Tulare Lake. So when you think of Central Valley, if you just kind of go straight out from Fresno, maybe a little bit, Visalia. Yeah, you can just go straight, and so you would end up in what is now called Pismo Beach. Yes, lots of things there. There is no trace of us in those areas. It's I try and say it in English. Pismo Beach. The real name of it is Pismo, which means the place of the black stuff, which is those tar balls that roll up from the ocean. You'll see those. Those are natural. So those natural tar balls that roll up. The way that the coast is situated and the way that Avila is situated, the way that Pismo is situated, those tar balls roll up there, and we utilized them and traded with these guys because for us, we used them to caulk our ocean canoes. We use them sometimes to line baskets to make them waterproof. And then we traded it because it could be mixed with pine pitch and used as like an epoxy. Which we still do today.
Yeah. Is there another question?
I'm from Southern California, and I left there in 1985. But in my schooling and everything I did, and I did not live under a rock, there was never any mention of indigenous communities or people or history or anything. Just
yeah, it's very void. Yeah. We're very small communities, very invisible. Although we did have this discussion yesterday. So to remedy that, part of what the state of California did is to do the California state history. And so in 4th grade, everybody has to learn finally about California Indians. Only they make us redo the missions. So you have a few of us California Indians, and we were just talking about this. She's like, did you have to make a mission when you were a kid? I'm like, yeah. So the very people that annihilated us were forced in our classroom to rebuild these missions and talk about them. What was your mission project?
Man, I can't even remember at this point. It was, I think I was one of those kids as well that was like, oh, I'm gonna just tell you about this very last minute. I'm just gonna construct what I can for my grade. And, let's just call that, what is it called? An act of
resistance.
Resistance, yes.
Yeah, so I think there's they're actively working kind of to change that curriculum, but it's a slow process. So.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
I've learned a lot today from what's going on. It's kind of amazing that abalone, first of all, that shocked me sitting here. Mm-hmm. And I live part-time in California. When you said they took away the water, were you referring to Army Corps of Engineers, or was it landowners, or was it a combination of all of them?
Combination. So the theft of water from Tulare Lake has been primarily for the agricultural industry in California, but it's been a combination of different institutions that have taken part in making that happen. And because California is such a large producer of food for the rest of the United States, water is extremely political in California, as you know. And so and unfortunately, tribes usually get like the leftover, right? And which is why your community often runs out of water. And I know it sounds strange to hear that, like, California, because people think of it as having this like incredible infrastructure and technology, but there are communities in California, very rural communities, that lose water in the valley, in the Central Valley. Not just tribal communities, but even some of the non-tribal communities, the little towns that we talked about yesterday, that little town. So there are still like communities that go without running water in California. I know. For pistachios and almonds. Yeah. And those trees do require a lot of water, so it doesn't make sense to put them there. But because of the soil is so rich, everything grows there, but that's because, again, it is the bottom of a lake. And so when you think about when we use natural fertilizers. We use a lot of fish waste or organic materials, and so that is the perfect soil that has all of that, and so it makes for great growing conditions. But industrialized farm has really, really taken a toll on the land.
Yeah, I think something I found out within my research too is since the extinction of the lake, the ground levels have sunk about 24 inches.
Yeah.
Because they also, in the drought seasons, because they have changed this landscape, it's not, as consistent. They dig underground and plunder this water as well.
Yeah, because it's still underneath Tulare Lake, the aquifers fill up, but that's also just taken.
Yep.
Oh, one more question here.
Do your cultures have any connections with the Mojave people? We have a Mojave collection in
Okay.
IRC.
Mostly just through shell trade is a relationship to Mojave, and that would be my community. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. We were mapping trade routes yesterday, and I was showing her where Cara Romero's land is, because I was showing her some of the shell trade routes. Because I think that those trade routes are important because that's how you find out who you were connected to and who you traded with. And I find it amazing, right, that when you go to Chaco, there are parrot feathers and remnants of cacao, right? It tells you about relationships. It tells you about who was trading with who and who your ancestors could have intermarried with or gone home with or exchanged information with. And so for us, my community was prolific in the shell trade. So for me, we have stories of going out, to Chemehuevi, which is where Cara Romero is from, and then from Chemehuevi, they would come inland into Zuni, into Santa Fe.
Okay, before we go, can y'all just tell us a little bit about what you've got going on now or any projects that are coming up?
Well, she has a quilting project that she was going to do for her BFA, but after we discussed it, she's going to do it after her BFA. And I was laughing because I was at Kara's studio the other day. We're planning, just so you know, Indian Market Weekend at Kara's studio. We'll have a show. And so we were talking about a project that Kara wanted to do. I'm like, oh my God, I have a student that wants to do the same project. Like, you guys are on the same vibe, like, without even knowing each other or talking to each other. So do you want to talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, so initially for my senior project, I was going to make a family tree quilt. So, usually what my grandma told me is that we would make these quilts, and it's kind of like, every woman within that generation, like, makes one. So I was like, well, I'm working with this fabric and cyanotype, and, what better way to, like, honor my, point in my ancestry than to show my whole family in this tree and where the roots have lied and where I lie within this tree. And, and it evolved talking to Leah to also finding these archived images of yokuts from my valley and plotting out the farm plots and replacing it.
So what we wanted to do is, well, you wanted to do, is I just suggested it, but to take an aerial map of that checkerboard farmland through their reservation lands and make those squares identical to that aerial agricultural map that has been overlaid your community, and then doing the cyanotypes over those.
Yeah. And, within that project, the only reason it has been delayed is because, the lack of representation, really trying to find these images, really, like, to fill this quilt. Our documentation is kind of slim, really.
Right, for
because
California
that
Indians,
area.
documentation is really slim, and we were laughing because she's like, we only have one Edward Curtis photo. There's only one yokut that was photographed in all his collections.
Or one Tachi yokut.
Yeah, one Tachi, that's what it was, one Tachi. Documentation and research is really hard for California Indians because there just isn't a lot of it. And so that's why this quilt project will be so important, because it'll serve as one of those archives that other students can go to and see all of it put together rather than having to do the research themselves. So in some ways, I feel like she's already stepping into being a future mentor for other California Indian students by doing this project. And so, yeah, and just finding old aerial views of your homeland was also challenging, so that we could map out those squares to look like the farmland patchwork that has been displaced so much of your community. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it'll be a project that will happen after the BFA show.
Well, we look forward to learning more about it and to seeing you continue your practice, and it sounds really exciting. Thank you both so much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
For everybody in the audience, please join us next week for our final event in the speaker series, and that will be the Growing Thunders. That one will be at 11:30. Thank you again for coming, and please grab some snacks on your way out and take them with you. Thank you.
Thank you.